Blog Talk Radio.
Michamo Afurakanu Afuraitkaitnit Neye Odwira da Medinde Odwira fo Kwesi Ranem Bata Akan. Apamumai Maduka Etipi Mu Odwira fo. That means greeting to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning African Black people. Today is Odwira Day Purification Day. My name is Odwira fo Kwesi Ranem Bata Akan. Odwira fo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yedase, we thank you once again for tuning in to the show. We're going to put a couple of links in the chat room regarding the information that we will be going over. If you have a question or a comment in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat room. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, just hit the number 1. So that we can see that your hand is raised and we can connect with you. We just put links to the NHOMA page from our website, and we will be touching on information in the book MASIE as well as SASETEM. So you can check out those two on the page. For the individuals who are new to the broadcast, we have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. On Joda, Mondays we have Akanfo Nanason, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion, where we deal with the Akan expression of ancestral religion, dealing with clarifying concepts with regard to cosmology, with regard to philosophy, with regard to the nature and function of the Great Mother and the Great Father, the Supreme Being, Nyamewa and Nyame, called Amenet and Amen in ancient Kamet and Kanat. We're called Nyamewa, typically in Nyame, Nyakan traditions, the nature and function of the Abosom, the forces in nature, the divinities, the goddesses and gods, the spirit forces that animate creation, the nature and function of the Nananung Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our blood circle, the nature and function of the Okra and the Okrawa, the soul, the divine consciousness, the divinity that dwells within the head region of Afurakani, Afuraitkaini people. All of these aspects of culture and also cosmology, how they all fit into our cosmology and so forth. There's misinformation being propagated in the Western Hemisphere as well as on the continent regarding Akan ancestral religion by individuals who have been infected by white culture, white pseudo-religion, whether they are in the Western Hemisphere or on the continent. Those who have been infected, their presentation of ancestral culture is infected, and therefore they put forward false information about ritual practice, about cosmology, and so forth. Even though on the outside they appear to be traditional people, they have been infected. So therefore we are clarifying and purifying these concepts, this reality, this knowledge of our culture. So that's what we deal with on Joda on Monday night. On Awukuda or Akuada, which is Wednesday, we have our show Egua Marketplace. What we do with Egua Marketplace is we showcase Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions that are serving the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community in a positive capacity, and who also are informed by their ancestral religious practice. And therefore that ancestral religious practice informs their service to the community. So we have individuals come on to talk about their business, their philosophy, how they're serving the community, and so forth. We also have shows where we talk about the ancestral approach to trade and commerce and various other topics as well. So in the context of Egua Marketplace, Okom economic development model. It is an approach to economic development rooted in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African ancestral religious values. So we have published that document. You can study that document, download that document, Okom Economic Development Model. You can download it directly from the Okom Economic Development page on our website. We just put the link there. The website, of course, is odwirafo.com, ODWIRAF as in free, o.com. You can go to the Okom page for that. Also on that page, you will find the 4-part series we did on Blog Talk Radio, OKOM parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, where we dissect the model, bring clarity to all aspects of the model, and show its applications to various aspects of our lives as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. So you can download that 4-part series from that page as well. We also have the broadcast Egua Kunti, which is economic warfare. That broadcast you can download. Also, No Kwarefo Ne Amambre, self-employment and ancestral culture. So all 6 of those broadcast archives you can download directly from the OKOM Economic Development page, in addition to the model itself. As part of our OKOM Economic Development model, part of the fabric of that model is our strategy, which we call to starve the beast and feed the pride. That means that we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have potentially wasted with the businesses owned by the white offspring, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We reallocate the funds away from those white businesses, starve that white beast, and feed the pride. We make donations or support access products and services from the business, organization, or institution of the week. We are targeting one Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks. And we are on week number 19. So when you look on the OKOM Economic Development page, you will also see, in addition to the OKOM Economic Development Model publication, which is a free download, of course, and the 6 videos we just talked about, you will see the list of businesses, and the list of businesses is ever growing. Individuals who have come onto the show, sat with us for 2 hours on our Egua Marketplace show, talked about their business, talked about organization, their institution, talked about their philosophy, how their true story behind establishing their business, organization, or institution, and how their ancestral religious values inform their service to the community. They talk about the great work that they are doing in the community. So when you go to the page, you will see that list of businesses. You will see their direct links to their website so that you can go directly to their websites to support them. You will also see the link to the 2-hour interview that they sat with us on Egua Marketplace Day to talk about their business, organization, or institution. So all of that information is there. So the key is we're targeting one business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks. And we have supported, as a community, 19 businesses so far. When you starve the beast and feed the pride, we're not talking about generating new revenue in this process. We're talking about utilizing the revenue we already generate. We're reallocating that from our enemies. So therefore, if you potentially would have wasted $10 through the course of a 7-day week at McDonald's, or $10 throughout the course of a 7-day week at Starbucks, or $10 throughout the course of a 7-day week at Walmart or CVS, purchasing products that really have no good effects upon your health, well-being, and so forth. Instead of spending $10 or $20 with those white businesses, you starve the beast and feed the pride. You reallocate that $20 to the business, organization, institution of the week, either going to their website to make a donation or accessing their product and or service. Of course, if 1,000 people in the community did that, then that means an infusion of $20,000 into a black business, meaning you're taking $20,000 away from the white businesses that we have typically been giving that $20,000 to every single week. And this time you're going to reallocate that directly to a black business who deserves that. When they receive that $20,000 infusion of capital, they will be able to not only keep the business open, expand their products and services so that they can serve us at a greater capacity, serve more of our people at a greater capacity, hire people within the community so they can have employment, so they can take care of themselves, take care of their responsibilities, take care of their families, while they are serving us at a greater capacity. So it's a win-win situation for us. If we do not starve the beast and feed the pride, then by default, we are starving ourselves and feeding our enemies. We are employing our enemies and employing our enemies' children, the whites and their offspring. It's helping them to expand their businesses while our businesses collapse. Businesses are going to collapse based on our lack of support. We want the white businesses to collapse based on our lack of support and reallocate that over $950 billion that we spend with the whites and their offspring on a yearly basis, reallocate that to our businesses. The $950 billion is going to be spent. We're either going to spend it with them or we're going to spend it with our people. Any money that we spend with the whites and our offspring is supporting them and not supporting us. So no matter how we spend it, it's never a waste of money to make a donation or support a black business on any level, because if you don't do that, you are supporting our enemy. So this is what we deal with on the OCOM Economic Development Model page, and this is what we're dealing with on EGUA Marketplace Day. So, of course, tonight is Benada, also Abenada, which is Tuesday. The show is called Odwira. Odwira means purification. In the Akan language, it also means the celebration of purification. However, the Akan language is derived from our ancient ancestral parent language going back tens of thousands of years to ancient Kanat, Nubia, ancient Kemet, thousands of years ago, and that parent language is the parent language of the various languages across the continent. So therefore, you will find when you look at the language of ancient Kemet and look at the Medutu, the so-called hieroglyphs, you'll find that the term Jida means purification, and Jida also means the celebration of purification. So this is an ancient term. On the show, Odwira, we purify concepts, purify cosmology, purify philosophy, purify knowledge of ritual practices, purify the knowledge of the nature, identity, and function of the great mother and great father, Amenet and Amen, the creator and creatress, Ra and Ra'et, the various divinities, and of course the creator and creatress are grandchildren of the Supreme Being, Amen and Amenet. So we purify concepts, purify the nature of the divinities, the Ntoru, the Yabosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, and so forth. We deal with ancestral religion in general. On Monday nights, Joda, we deal specifically with the Akan expression of Nanasom, ancestral religion. On Benada, Tuesday nights, Abenada, we deal with Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion in general, no matter what group we come from, and how it impacts every aspect of our lives. Our thoughts, intentions, and actions are impacted by our practice of ancestral religion. Nanasom is our catch-all term for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African ancestral religion. And of course, we have published our book, Afuraka, Afuraitkait, The Origin of the Term Africa, where we prove conclusively, and we are the first and only to prove and show that that term comes directly from our ancient languages in ancient Kanat and Kemet. We show the Medusa, the hieroglyphs for that. But Nanasom is our term for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African ancestral religion as a catch-all term, no matter what expression it takes, whether it's on the continent or in the Western Hemisphere. In essence, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion, or Nanasom, is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. So through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject, to hate, to repel, in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions so that we can restore order to our lives. So the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion, Nanasom, is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. We always say Jida or Ojida, purification operationalizes Nanasom. Purification operationalizes our practice of incorporating law and restoring balance so that we can realign ourselves with divine order every moment of every day. This is what we deal with regard to ancestral religion. For tonight, we're building upon this series of broadcasts where we have been defining our nature as a collective Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. We have become a collective group. We're a subset of the larger Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African Black people world community body, 2 billion people around the world. We are a subset of that, and we have become a collective in and of ourselves in the Western Hemisphere because of our trustery, because of our genetic blending, because of our ancestresses and ancestors and our ancestral blood circles blending as well, because of our existence in the Western Hemisphere and how we have interfaced with Afur and Afur, the Earth and Mother divinities in this region of the planet. So because of that, we've become a collective, a unique collective unto ourselves. And therefore, we designate that unique collective as ODWIRAMAN. Man means nation in the Akan language, but man also references nation, group, polity in ancient Kanat and Kemet. And as we said earlier, Jida means purification in the language of ancient Kemet as well. So ODWIRAMAN means the purified nation, the purified community, the purified people, meaning those of us we have so-called, quote-unquote, on the surface, lost, but then regained our ancestral culture. We are realigning ourselves and purifying ourselves and getting back to reality, realigning with divine order through the agency of the Abosom and the Nananom Unsamafo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, the Nananom Unsamafo of our direct blood circle, and the Abosom, the forces in nature, the Orisha Vodou that govern us, who come into the world with us. When our spirits enter the womb, these forces of nature are assigned to us and come into the world with us. So we are able to access our ancestral culture because we can access the forces in nature who are assigned to us by the Supreme Being before we even enter the womb. So when we get into the world, we are born into the world aligned with specific abosoms, specific orisha, specific vodou, as well as assigned to specific ancestresses and ancestors of our blood circle to guide us throughout the course of our lives. This means we are born into the world with a culture. And that culture is shaped and refined through our experiences, through our interfacing in the world, in the locale that we find ourselves with that region of the Earth Mother and the forces in nature, how they manifest in that region. So therefore, we have become a collective, a unique collective, interconnected with Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit on the continent, but we have become a unique collective. And this is why we designate our nation in the Western Hemisphere. That means all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere who ended up in the Western Hemisphere as a result of the Musuo Kesi, the great perversity, the enslavement era. We are ODWIRAMAN, the purified nation. So we have been talking about the identity of ODWIRAMAN, the character of ODWIRAMAN, our ancestral religious practice as ODWIRAMAN, Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion being the key to our liberation. We talked about Ebo, the nature of worth and value in ancestral economics as ODWIRAMAN, or the group of people who are ODWIRAMAN. And we also talked about institution building and continuity in ODWIRAMAN. So that the first was ODWIRAMAN, just talking about our nature and our identity. That was the first broadcast a couple of weeks ago. The second broadcast was dealing with institution building and continuity, showing the connection between Adjo and Adjoa, Alsar and Alset in that process of institution and building and continuity within the context of being an independent nation. Then that third installment of this ODWIRAMAN series, we talked about Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion as the key to our liberation. Of course, we talked about the liberation movement of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere, waging war against the so-called slave, master slaveholders, and bringing an end to enslavement in North America, Central America, South America, the Caribbean, through the power of ancestral religion. We went into detail about that. Then we talked about in that fourth installment, Ebo, the nature of worth and value in ancestral economics. talking about our approach and philosophical foundation for engaging one another in economic activity, trade, and commerce as ODWIRAMAN, as the purified nation. So we dealt with that, and then we went into some more detail. Give me a second right quick. Just want to make sure we didn't miss anything here. We need to pull something up real quick. But also what we did, so that was the fourth part of the series, and then the fifth part of the series, which actually was last night, we talked about Abain, the nature of government in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral culture, the philosophical foundation, the spiritual foundation of a governmental structure. Sound systems of governance and jurisprudence are rooted in cosmology, rooted in our understanding and recognition of the reality of divine order, and we replicate that divine order in our social order. So an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit society is a social order rooted in the divine order of creation. We can replicate that divine order because we can align with the forces in nature, the spirit forces in nature, the abosom, the orishas, voodoo, and so forth, that animate creation and are the embodiments of divine order in creation. So organs within the great divine body of the Supreme Being that regulate order within the great divine body. And we are cells of those organs. So because we can attune to the forces of nature and attune to the Supreme Being, we can attune to divine order, and then we can replicate that order when we are establishing society. And of course, that those societies are governed, and the government is rooted in that reflection of divine order. So we talked about that last night and went into detail about that last night. And of course, all of the broadcasts you can download directly. We uploaded all of them to our YouTube channel on Odwira, so you can, if you missed those broadcasts, you can download them. Of course, you can also download all of the 153 broadcasts of our Blog Talk radio program directly from the Blog Talk channel as well. So either way, you can either go to the Blog Talk channel and download them, or you can go to the Odwira channel on YouTube and download the YouTube version of the broadcast as well. So tonight, we want to get into talking about KUROW. KUROW in the Akan language means a town or city, and so forth. And we talk about, in the title, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Town Incorporation Movement. So why are we calling KUROW, which is the title for a town, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African or Black Town Incorporation? We're not talking about the notion of somebody setting aside a few blocks inside of a city and having an economic, activity in a certain region and calling it Black Town or New Black Town or Africa Town, or things like that. Like a Chinatown in the city or Koreatown in the city, and then we're talking about Africa Town or Black Town. That's not what we're doing. We're talking about an ancestral precedent established by our ancestors and ancestors, not only thousands of years ago, but which was continued once we were forced to migrate to the Western Hemisphere. So those of us who were forced to migrate to the Western Hemisphere during the Musuo Ketie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era, those who maintain their ancestral religious traditions, that means they maintain their adherence to divine order. And when you maintain your adherence to divine order, that means you're maintaining your adherence to the expansive and contractive poles of divine order. And the expansive and contractive poles of divine order is law and love, of course. Law and love is the same word and concept. So the expansive pole of order is divine law, and the contractive pole of divine order is divine hate. So law and hate are the expansive and contractive poles of divine order. Through law, we express order. Through hate, we impress order. The male and female forces of divine law is ma'ah, are ma'ah and ma'at. The male and female forces of divine hate, divine contraction, is Heru, Behudet, and Sechima, Sekmet, also called Benna and Abenna in the Akan tradition, Ogun and Iyami Abeni in the Yoruba tradition, and so forth. So these are forces of divine order. The expansive pole is law, which is the expressive pole of order. The contractive pole is hate, the impressive pole of divine order. So, for example, of course, your immune system and lymphatic systems are the entities, the systems within your body that execute divine hate, divine rejection. They destroy cancerous cells, destroy free radicals and other bacteria entering into the system. They kill those cells in order to maintain the integrity of the divine order. So when we publish in our book, Madaneci, Divine Law and Divine Hate, we go into detail about that. We trace the etymology of the word hate, which its roots actually in ancient Kemet and Kanat. They're not in Proto-Indo-European languages, and we prove that conclusively. So the precedent that our people established by maintaining their adherence to divine order, meaning they're maintaining their adherence to divine law and divine hate, Madaneci. That means they will accept that which is orderly and they will reject that which is disorderly. When you embrace divine order, you accept order and you reject disorder. You repel disorder. So when you find yourself in a situation where you are enslaved, you embrace order, meaning you hate disorder and purveyors, the whites and their offspring. So you don't seek to maintain yourself within that slave society. You seek to exterminate the whites and their offspring and free yourselves from enslavement. Empowered by your ancestresses and ancestors and the abosom, the forces of nature, we did that and we will continue to do that. So our people were animated in that capacity. And we began to free ourselves from enslavement, waging war against the whites and their offspring, burning down plantations, establishing independent nations outside of the plantation. Dismal Swamp being one major example of that. Over 2,000 people living in the so-called Dismal Swamp, but it was an independent, sovereign nation because our people were living there intergenerationally, raising their children there, growing food and so forth, medicines, everything else, building shelter. And when the whites and their offspring sent their armies, their militias into Dismal Swamp to try to drag our people back into slavery, they were met with the formidable army of the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. And we waged war against them, forcing the whites and their offspring to say, we would rather accept a peace treaty because we could not defeat you. So while there were some people living on plantations intergenerationally, some people were living in places like Dismal Swamp and defending their sovereign nation intergenerationally, meaning their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren grew up free in an independent sovereign nation, whereas others were still growing up on plantations. So they freed themselves during enslavement. Because of the work of Okunfo Yao, Okunfo Kwabena, Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, other individuals waging war against the whites and their offspring, exterminating the whites and their offspring, launching massacres of the whites and their offspring, the whites and their offspring, the Gullah Wars as well, waging war against the whites and their offspring in the United States government, the military for over 50 years, never having been dragged back into enslavement, constantly waging war. It forced and broke the whites and their offspring and forced them to accept the reality of abolition and emancipation. They did not want to move towards emancipation. It had nothing to do with just simple economics. We were waging war against them and killing them. And they realized that they could no longer hold our people because if they continued in that process, we would end up massacring all of them. So they were forced into that position. After the so-called legal enslavement was over, the children of those Okunfo, those warriors and warrioresses, they still had that same kind of spirit. So therefore, of course, when you had Reconstruction, then you have entities rising up like the Ku Klux Klan and everything else. Our people recognized, on one hand, the end of legal enslavement had taken place, but at the same time, we were still being oppressed, even though we became sharecroppers and we had our quote-unquote own land in some regard, but we were still basically slaves, simply being paid a little money here and there and had a little bit more movement, a little bit more autonomy, but we were still suffering. So our people who had that spirit of revolution and resolution, the expansive and contractive poles of divine wisdom or intelligence, as we talk about it in modernity, divine law and divine hate. Nyansa, wisdom, intelligence, is composed of two complementary poles. The expansive pole of wisdom, intelligence, is revolution. And the contractive pole of wisdom or intelligence is resolution. You revolt so that you can resolve. When you have a dilemma, you revolt, which means to return. Go back to your original state, condition, draw from that reservoir of knowledge. And once you draw from that reservoir of knowledge through revolt or returning revolution, going back to the point of origin, then you apply that to bring resolution, to the current state, the current dilemma, the current issue. So you revolt so that you can resolve. Revolution and resolution, two halves of a whole, and that whole is divine wisdom. So those of our people who have that spirit within them, they engage in revolution and resolution. Even though legal enslavement was over, just like they escaped, their ancestors escaped, and some of them escaped from enslavement and set up their own independent nations. Well, after legal enslavement was over, everything happened with Reconstruction. Our people recognized that things really hadn't changed very much. Some of our people, quote unquote, escaped from that kind of enslavement as well. Even though legal enslavement was over, they escaped from that condition by migrating away from those areas and establishing independent communities, establishing Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African black towns, and incorporating towns. Just like their predecessors escaped from enslavement, escaped from plantations, and set up sovereign independent nations, some of our people continued that process and moved forward in later generations and established independent towns, incorporated towns, all black towns, where they were in control. They were the mayors, they were the police, they owned all the businesses, they owned all the land and so forth. They established their independence. And these towns, over 1,000 of them, all over the southern United States, west, east, central, Midwest, and so forth. So that was another piece. Then you have some of our people in later generations, in the same fashion. Some of our people who are still living in the South. And then you get into the 30s and 40s and 50s and on. They talk about the great migration up north. The reason why some of our people moved up north is because they recognized that even though legal enslavement had, quote unquote, ended, they were still suffering in the South. So when they heard that there was more freedom of movement, or it appeared to be more freedom of movement in the North, then we, quote unquote, escaped from the plantations. We had the same spirit that our predecessors had. And those who migrated up north were those who were like, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're going to go somewhere further north and reestablish ourselves. Some people went to cities that already existed and tried to make their way in those cities, like places like Chicago and Detroit and places like that. But then other black people established independent black towns and incorporated those black towns. So this is what we're dealing with tonight, that whole notion of freedom, independence. We're talking about a two-pronged approach dealing with independence, ahofadi, liberation, independence. Some of our people are working right now on saving the funds and strategizing so that they can repatriate to Afuraka, Afuraitkait. They will either go to a specific country and establish themselves there, while some individuals are trying to, establish a space for themselves, a space for our people to have an independent nation that Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people can migrate to and be in control of, just like the White Nile Spring established Liberia, established Sierra Leone as a place for enslaved Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit to go back to and reintegrate themselves into the continent. Of course, the White Nile Spring had ulterior motives. They wanted to pit our people, many of whom were brainwashed with white culture, against the native Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, and create a great deal of conflict. And once that conflict jumped off and murders and war and so forth took place in between these groups, then the White Nile Spring can come in and take control of the resources once again. So, of course, that was the undergirding philosophy behind the establishment of Liberia and Sierra Leone. Of course, they did not have good intentions. Some of our people went anywhere and tried to do what they needed to do. However, some of our people are still looking in that region. Some of our people are simply repatriating to different countries on the continent. Some of our people have the mindset of repatriating first, but then working towards the establishment of an independent nation for Afurakani, Afuraitkait people from the West to reestablish themselves in that nation themselves. So some people are working on that. Some people have started that process. Some people are saving and strategizing towards that right now. Then you also have, and we must recognize the reality that in this moment, within this year or the next year or maybe the next 5 years or 10 years for some people, because of their situations, whether it's family situations, relatives who they are taking care of who are ill, in the court system for their children, whatever it is, they are not in the position to repatriate to the continent, and they won't be in that position because of various circumstances for the next 5 years or maybe the next 10 years before they can actually make that move. In the meantime, what are we going to do with regard to millions of individuals who have become consciously aware, recognize that they are part of ODWIRAMAN, Purified nation, reestablishing their culture, returning to their ancestrally inherited culture. Once you begin to embrace your ancestrally inherited culture, you align yourself with divine order. You can no longer just simply unconsciously live in a racist society. You begin to strategize and establish plans and lay out plans for some form of independence, some form of autonomy. If it is not repatriation, it's going to be some form of autonomy right where we are. What is the most effective means by which we can establish some form of autonomy that's as close to a nation state as repatriation? That is the incorporation of black towns, or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit towns, establishing not just communities, but establishing our own town, where we own all of the land, where we are the mayors, we are the police, we are the firemen, we control every aspect of the town, we control all of the business. Of course, we first purify ourselves culturally, ritually, and spiritually, so that when we access land and purchase land and so forth and begin to build, we're not bringing the same self-destructive, perverse ideas and attitudes and habits into this new territory. So we purge ourselves of white, perverse culture, and we engage in the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance through Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion. So once we engage that process, we purify ourselves, purify our families, connect with other individuals who have purified themselves and purified their families, and their home is a liberated zone. We connect with other individuals who are on the same page, and then we begin to pool our resources to access land and begin to incorporate these black towns. People have incorporated towns for over 100 years. We have the capacity to do so. If our ancestresses and ancestors over 100 years ago, 150 years ago, even after those who established independent nations during enslavement successfully, if they could do that during enslavement, surely we can do this now, even after enslavement. If some of our people established over 1,000 black towns over the course of over 100 years, if they could do that back then, surely we can get in our cars and drive somewhere and pick out some land and pull some resources and incorporate a town. Of course, the whites and their offspring are doing that on a regular basis. So are Asians and Arabs and other so-called ethnic groups all around the country, establishing their own little suburbs, own little towns. You drive into the suburb and everybody in the suburb is Asian. All the signs of the businesses are Asian. Everything is Asian. Or you go to some Arab suburb or some Hindu or whatever it is. This is part of our ancestral legacy, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. So first what we're going to do is we're going to talk about I'll give an example of that. And before we get to that example right quick, we just want to talk briefly about the reason why we utilize the symbolism that you see on the event notification for the broadcast. We use two Adinkra symbols, and then we show an image of some Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people over 100 years ago who had established an independent black town, just to show you an image of what was taking place, it happening in action. But we have two Adinkra symbols. One of them is She, Wo, and She. An Adinkra symbol, the Akan people have hundreds of Adinkra symbols. Many of them can be found in the Medusa of ancient Kemet. She, Wo, and She means they try to burn you, but you do not burn. So these Adinkra symbols, these sacred geometric forms, each one of them has one or more ebe or proverbs associated with them. They carry the energy of that divine ancestral wisdom. She, Wo, and She, they try to burn you, but you do not burn. It's talking about the indestructible spirit, the unburnable spirit and nature of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning we have within us the capacity to be resilient, to overcome any obstacle. We are unburnable, as the symbol conveys. And then we have the Nyame Dria Adinkra symbol, and that Nyame Dria is called Nyame, or the Supreme Being, the Great Father, as well as Nyamewa, the Great Mother's Dria, or a tree. So you'll see in the Akan tradition, you see it looks like a staff, but it's really like a tree with certain branches cut off, and the branches are cut off at the top, and it looks like a long staff or a tree, and inside the four little branches or three branches of vessel is placed within there. You have offerings for the abosom, substances to purify ourselves within that little shrine, and also what they call the Nyame Akuma, the Nyame's act. And of course, we're going to get into detail about that Nyame's act. It's a ritual piece for those ancient axes that we find. When archaeologists find these smooth axes that have been in the ground for thousands of years in Ghana, amongst the Akan, when they find those ancient axes, they call them Nyame Akuma, Nyame's axe. And of course, these sacred divine axes, Nyame's axes, when you look at ancient Kemet and you see that the symbol for deity, Ntoro, so-called Neter, is an axe, then there's a direct connection between that and the Nyame Kuma, the divine supreme being, Ekuma, or act. It's talking about the splitting into the spirit realm. The term for prayer in Akan is apai, meaning prayer, ritual invocation. But the literal meaning of pai is to split or to cleave, like when you take an axe and split a tree or cleave a tree. So when you're talking about apai, ritual prayer, the sound vibrations that you release through incantation, they break through and create an incision. They cleave or split, make an incision into the spirit realm so you can enter through that incision and enter into the spirit realm so you can communicate with the abosom and the nananom, and so forth. So that splitting or that cleaving is coming from Nyamewa, Nyame Akuma, that divine act, which is directly related to the term for deity, and the symbol is an act in ancient Kemet, which the white offspring never understood why an act in and of itself was a symbol for a divinity. So we're going to get into that in a separate broadcast where we deal with that in detail. But we use those two symbols because, number one, we are unburnable, She, Wo, and She, indestructible. And we have proven that intergenerationally. Our people who escaped from enslavement and established independent nations show that they are She, Wo, and She. They are unburnable, indestructible. Those who established their own black town in the 1800s, so-called late 1800s, early 1900s, and so forth, and maintained these towns for generations, show that they are indestructible, unburnable. And these are our ancestresses and ancestors. So that unburnable nature, that indestructible nature is in our blood. It's not something abstract. We are directly descendant of those who survived in slavery. Some of the individuals who died, they never had children, so therefore they never had grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so forth. So there are many empty spaces around us where people would actually be living, walking around. But they do not exist because some people did not survive. We are direct descendants of the people who survived the torture and freed ourselves and reestablished ourselves and restored ourselves. So it is in our blood circle to maintain. It's in our blood circle to be resilient. So it's not something abstract, it's a reality. It's part of our ancestral blood circle. So Shewo and She denotes that. And the Nyame Dria is talking about that ancestral religious practice being at the root of our resilience. So this is why we use these two symbols. And of course, the Adintra symbols are not just artistic symbols. They are used ritually as well, used for shrines, used for divinity, used as matrices of energy that draw specific abosom and nananom and samako into that spiritual or ritual space, similar to veves that are used in Vodun. So, and we're going to get into that in other broadcasts as well. We've talked about that and touched on that in certain previous broadcasts. So, let's give an example of what we're talking about. In fact, first we're going to read something quickly about this notion of incorporation. Now, there's a specific article. Actually, no. We're going to go to an example. We're going to go to the example. There's a town in Maryland. The town is called North Brentwood, Maryland, a few minutes outside of D.C. So if you were driving down Rhode Island Avenue in northeastern D.C., as soon as you cross Eastern Avenue, you are in Maryland. You're in Mount Rainier, Maryland. You drive another couple of minutes, and then you hit North Brentwood. You can walk there from D.C., or if you're driving just a couple of minutes, and then you hit North Brentwood, Maryland. So they have their own website, northbrentwood.com. This is just an example of what we're talking about. All right, so we're going to look at the history section of North Brentwood. North Brentwood was the first African-American incorporated town in Prince George's County, Maryland. Incorporation occurred in 1924. They established the town earlier, but they incorporated it later. So you can have unincorporated towns and then incorporated towns. You can have unincorporated communities and incorporated communities. We're going to talk about what the advantages of incorporation are. So it was the first African-American incorporated town in Prince George's County, Maryland. Incorporation occurred in 1924. It is situated 6 miles northeast of the ellipse between Mount Rainier, Maryland, and Hyattsville, Maryland. North Brentwood was originally part of the Castle Tract, later known as the Highlands. In 1887, Captain Wallace Bartlett formed Holiday Land and Improvement Division. He sold plots of land in the low area subject to flooding to African Americans. So this is Achiwadifo selling the land, that land in the low area, the kind of land that was subject to flooding. Of course, is going to sell the kind of land that's subject to flooding to our people, but we purchased the land because we wanted to establish something independent. Okay, so initially the land was designated for churches and a school. In 1898, the trolley line of the Columbia and Maryland Railway Company was completed through Randalltown, named after the first settlers, the Randall family. So there was a family, the Randalls. They had a settlement, and it was called Randalltown at that particular point. In 1902, the first school opened in Randalltown. So first, going back in 1887, they began to purchase the land. So by 1902, the first school opened in Randalltown with Henry and Peter Randall as trustees, Afurakani people in America. In 1904, the Holiday Land Company expanded and replotted 40 additional acres as a subdivision. The subdivision was named Brentwood after the Brent Estate in northeast Washington, D.C. In 1905, the First Baptist Church was organized under the leadership of Reverend James L. Jasper. The same year, Jeremiah Hawkins moved to the town, purchased several lots within the town, built a house, and became politically active. In 1907, Mr. William Conway organized the Brentwood Colored Citizens Association to provide members an opportunity for educational, scientific, literary, musical, social, and other beneficial endeavors. So now they are getting to the nation-building aspect. They got the land. They had a couple of settlements in the land. They expanded the land by purchasing more acres. And then they established the quote-unquote Colored Citizens Association because they wanted to begin to institutionalize their values. As we've talked about before, the 7 principal values of nation-building, methods of food production and preservation, methods of curing disease, establishing a military structure, the institutionalization of values, establishing educational institutions, training institutions, cultural institutions, ritual institutions, and so forth. So they began to establish educational, scientific, literary, musical, social, and other beneficial endeavors, institutionalizing these values. In 1920, Jeremiah Hawkins was elected as a delegate to the Republican National Convention in Kansas City. North Brentwood was incorporated under the leadership of Mr. Hawkins in 1924, and he became the first mayor. His cabinet members were Peter Randall and Madison Brown, councilman, Squire Garland, police justice, William Norton, town clerk, and John Gilmore, the treasurer. So that's in 1924. So they finally incorporated their unincorporated town. And then once they incorporated, they have a mayor, they have a police chief, they have a justice, they have everything they need, treasurer and so forth. All right. In 1952, the municipal building was constructed through citizens' volunteer labor under the leadership of Mayor William D. Bellows. So this is a small town. Everybody pitches in to build the municipal center, the seat of the city government, and they come together and do that. That's 1952. In 1975, the North Brentwood Community Center, operated by the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, was opened, and we're going to talk about how that works with regard to incorporation. In 1985, the North Brentwood flag was designed by Mrs. Victoria Wellborn and Mr. Perry Wheat. One of the reasons why that's important, of course, they have their own flag, but when you look at the top of the page on the northbrentwood.com website, you'll see their flag. It says the town of North Brentwood, Maryland. It shows the year 1924. They have a little shield, and the shield is red, black, and green. So obviously they were studying, some of the people in the town were studying Marcus Garvey and studying Pan-Africanism, liberation. So the shield of North Brentwood is red, black, and green. Clearly everybody in the town is not, Pan-Africanist, but there were enough people in the town who recognized that independence that they were establishing and perpetuating. And when they established that their flag, their own unique flag, they included those colors in the flag. In 1991, the Historical Society was organized by Lillian K. Beverly. The society collected data to verify the historical significance of North Brentwood. The project committee, under the leadership of Mrs. Ruth Wilson and attorney Orlando C. Hobbs, developed Footsteps from North Brentwood, an oral, pictorial, and artifact collection of life in North Brentwood from the 1900s to 1930. After completion, the collection was displayed at the Anacostia Smithsonian Museum from July 1996 to January 1997. Part of the exhibit was moved to the North Brentwood Community Center at the time, where it hung until May 1997. Before moving to the State House in Annapolis, the collection was placed in storage at the Anacostia Smithsonian Museum in December 1997 after the Annapolis viewing. In 2004, the North Brentwood Historical Society published Minding Our Own Business. The book is an oral history of North Brentwood's entrepreneurs. As quoted by previous Mayor Lillian K. Beverly, a time to remember those businesses that provided service, shelter, and food, including food for the soul. So why is this important, this section important with regard to them establishing a historical society, these projects that ended up in the Smithsonian, establishing the Brentwood Historical Society, publishing this information about the businesses and so forth. Again, this goes back to these principal values of nation building. It's not just entertainment. So they already established the association where they're dealing with scientific educational, literary, musical, social, and other beneficial endeavors. So they're already dealing with training everyone in the community in these various fields of endeavor. But then they established the historical society. And of course, these are similar steps that we take when we incorporate a town. This is a model. This is why we're going through this information. Why would they establish a historical society? Because part of the institutionalization of our values, which is the fourth principle of nation building, Ancestral nation restoration, is not only establishing institutions of training, for example, engineering, training in medicine, training in textile development, training in agricultural science, training in scientific endeavors and so forth, but also cultural and ritual institutions. Of course, ancestral religion, so we can maintain our adherence to divine order, but also true historical institutions. Why would you establish a true historical society? Because that's the institutionalization of your values. When you institutionalize the values of your culture within every individual in the community, from the time they are children to the time they're adults, then they will value the community. They will understand how important this town that they established is. Not only will they embrace it and recognize it and understand its value, but they will defend it. They will not only defend it, but they will always also seek to perpetuate it. They will seek to perpetuate the protocols that were established for the coming into being of the town and the preservation of the town. So this way, intergenerationally, you will be able to preserve the town. You won't have somebody, if you don't institutionalize your values, what you see is valuable, what you see is worthy, then your enemies, the whites and their offspring, our enemies will come in and try to place their values and say, well, it's not important. You don't need a black town anymore. We have a black president. We don't need to be separate. We need to be integrated, all this other kinds of nonsense, so they can come in and take over your town and destroy what you have built. But when you institutionalize your values, for example, through establishing a true historical society, or as they call it, historical society, every single individual from childhood through adulthood recognizes the value of the town, the value of what they have built. They have pride in what they have built, and they will seek to preserve what they have built, and they will seek to perpetuate what they have built, and they will seek to perpetuate the protocols that were established for this town to come into fruition. So this is the value of doing that. So next, in 2005, the town offices moved to the old First Baptist Church building. They transformed it. The building houses the new town offices and the Gwendolyn Britt Senior Activity Center, named after Senator Britt, the 47th District. So they established a Senior Activity Center to take care of their nananong mpanyiko, their cultivated elders and elders. The mayor, council, and citizens look forward to the construction of the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center in North Brentwood on Rhode Island Avenue, which is coming up. The vision of this museum and educational programming is to enable all visitors to gain a sense of identity regarding local history while broadening cultural understanding. So therefore, once again, they want people to understand their identity. And one of the things that's happening, not only in North Brentwood as well as Mount Rainier and some other places, you have an influx of Mexicans, other Hispanics, coming into these areas trying to buy a property in these areas. When people have a sense of their identity, for example, in North Brentwood, they will not allow some Mexicans to come over and take over their town. And the next thing you know, North Brentwood is no longer a black town. You have a Mexican mayor, and they're having all kinds of Mexican cultural activities and squeezing the blacks out after over 100 years of them having worked on establishing this town. So when people have a sense of identity, they will not allow that to take place. 13 mayors have served the town since its incorporation. They are listed according to the term of office. So they list the different people: Jeremiah Hawkins, William T. Allen, George Lucas, Julius Wheeler, John Gilmore, Sandy P. Baker, William D. Bellows, LeVar Thornton, Raymond Hall, William Bellows, Raymond Hall again, Sandy P. Johnson, Arthur Dock, Lillian K. Beverly, and Petrella Robbins. The town of North Brentwood, which continues to grow, and bring in a more diverse community, has always had a group of dedicated, civic-minded citizens who organize, persevere, and strive for improvement. So that's what they're dealing with. If you look at, for example, the services and ordinances, and these are some of the things. They have, of course, their own police department. They have emergency lines, senior nutrition and transportation. They have legal aid. They have a Department of Family Services, county info. They have Medicare info. They have a call-a-bus program. They have trash collection, bulk trash, recycling pickup, leaf pickup, yard waste, plastic bag recycling, all these things going on in their city, and they're controlling their city. This is a situation when we talk about, for example, people voting for president. Of course, the whites in Arab Spring are not counting your vote. They choose who the president is going to be years in advance, and they simply put the propaganda out and fools go out thinking that they're actually voting for somebody. When you understand divine law and divine hate, you don't assume that your enemy is telling you the truth. You know exactly what's going on. If you control your own town, however, and you control the voting booth and you control the machines and you're in absolute 100% control and you know the people in the town and you know the candidates and so forth, then you're in control of a real process. You're not dependent on your absolute enemies to tell you, oh, you voted for this person, just trust our machines, trust what we say. If there's 99% black people in the town and all of you voted for a cracker. Of course, that's what would happen if they were in control of the machine. But when you're in control, absolute control of your own city, then you can engage in electoral politics because you're in 100% control. So, of course, they have their emergency preparedness, public works actions, all kinds of things that any other city. Now, we just want to get a couple of other bits of basic information just so you can see the scope and see the possibility. Because just as they've done this and they started over 100 years ago, it can be the same thing can be done today. Wherever we are in the country, people are going to live somewhere. People move every year, every other year. Their leases are up and so forth. They either stay in the city, or some people get tired of living in the city because the prices are so high and there's regentrification. So they move to a neighboring suburb or a small town right outside the city. If you're going to move, for example, some people can move right to a small town. They can move to a town like North Brentwood. Or they can establish a town right outside the major city like they established North Brentwood. And therefore, instead of living in some other suburb established by the whites and their offspring, you can live in the suburb that you established yourself. You may be working in the city, and every time you go home home to this white suburb, or a suburb that's a black suburb, but it was established by the whites and their offspring. But now you've established your own suburb, your own town, your own city, incorporated your own city, so you may still work in the city, but when you go home, you know you're going to a city that was founded by your people. You have your own mayor, you have your own police, you have everything that you need based on who we are. Okay, so we just wanted to give a couple of statistics real quick. The population of North Brentwood right now, so-called 2010, 13,010, 517 people. The estimate for 13,012, 526 people. So it's still a small town, but that's all you need. A number of families and so forth get together, maybe spending between $1,000 and $2,000 on per acre of land. A number of families get together, get enough land, 40, 50, 60 acres or something like that, and establish a town. We're either going to live in town, the suburbs, run by the whites and their offspring, or we're going to live in our own. And we have the capacity to do so. We simply need to organize. First, we get on point, on the same page with regard to culture, with regard to purification, with regard to spiritual alignment, so we're not bringing perversity into the new town. And once you get on the same page and people begin to naturally work together, as we talked about before, we don't need to seek to work together per se. Once we adhere to law, then the law unifies us instantaneously. And we talked about that earlier. So, 526 total land area, 0.1 square mile, which is not very large. So when we talk about incorporating a town, this is a lot. There are some towns that don't have 500 people. Some towns have 75 people. Some towns have 40 people, but they incorporated these towns. They are all different sizes all across the country. So we just want to see some of those small, that this endeavor is not as daunting as some would try to make it appear. When you read about black towns, and very often the whites in Alice Springs are writing about black towns, you'll see, if you Google black towns in America, you see articles written in the Washington Post and written on other white sites, but then you also see articles written about the establishment of black towns on Negro websites, like the Root and the Griot and Negro websites like that. And they will still focus on how the town started off and then they all collapsed and how everybody left the town. They only focus on the towns that started off okay and then they collapsed and they didn't work out. By the time you end up finishing the article, you're like, well, establishing a black town doesn't work out, and that was back in the day, and we don't need to even focus on that, and that's just something interesting about our history, but we shouldn't even focus on it. By the time you finish reading those articles, this is what you get. But when people who are conscious and aware publish information, and we talk about this kind of information, we focus on the possibility. We focus on the potential. We focus on the successes of those who actually established towns and continue for over 100 years. So this is what we focus on. And the task is not as daunting as they would like to paint the task to be. It's not doomed from the outset. When you read these certain articles, they will put forward this notion that, listen, we are in a new era now. We shouldn't even be considering establishing an independent town. Why would we focus on a black town? We just need to fight for our rights in America. While everybody else is establishing their own independent suburbs and towns. So it's not natural for us to do anything other than focus on that reality. Either we're going to focus on repatriation and move in that direction, but for those who are not able to move towards repatriation immediately, then we need to be focusing on a means by which we can be the most autonomous possible while we are still living in the United States. And the greatest degree of autonomy you can have is to establish your own town and run your own town. And of course, our people typically are not talking about this. So when you look at people who are consider themselves Pan-African, consider themselves cultural or conscious or revolutionaries or whatever else, typically they do not have a strategy. They'll talk about repatriation, or they'll talk about that in theory. A handful of people actually engage that process, but the majority who are talking about it, deep down inside, they know they are never going to engage that process. So they talk about it in theory. Then they talk about fighting for rights and fighting for this. And some people talk about, for example, the Republic of New Africa talking about we're going to free the land, the 5 states, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and so forth, knowing that the whites in Alice Springs will never free up these 5 states for black people to take over and live in. The whites in Alice Springs are never going to free anything unless you wage war and exterminate them. Outside of that, nothing is going to be freed up. So we need to deal with the reality. The establishment, these organizations who have been talking about, they have the key, whether it's pseudo-spiritual organizations, Christian or Islamic, or all these other nonsensical organizations that have been around for decades, some for over nearly a century or over a century and so forth. Why haven't they moved forward and established independent towns and incorporated independent towns? If they've been talking about nation building for 50 and 60 years or 70 years, why haven't they established at least one town, like the people in North Brentwood who have had a town for over 100 years, and they're not claiming to be conscious and aware and cultural and so forth. They may not have that understanding, but they were driven enough spiritually and ancestrally to move forward and actually establish something and maintain something intergenerationally. So all of these groups talking about Pan-Africanism, talking about independence, liberation, and so forth, why have they not even considered, or definitely not been successful in establishing their own independent towns where people can say, listen, This is where we are. This is what we have. We have our own mayors. We have our own, police force. We have our own businesses. We own our own land. We defend our territory, and we're raising our children, and we're establishing institutions and so forth. We have elementary schools, high schools. We have a university. We have everything we need. We have a hospital, a healing center from a holistic perspective. We have everything we need in our town, and we've not just been talking about this for 60, 70 years. We've actually done this. Where are they? Because these people really don't have these strategies because they're rooted in self-hatred in reality. They're still following the plan of the whites and their offspring. They're trying to be socialists or some other nonsense, trying to get our people to incorporate pseudo-spirituality from the whites and their offspring, trying to blacken up nonsensical philosophy, fictional characters who never existed like Muhammad and Abraham and Isaac and Yeshua and so forth, or they're trying to convince you to be atheist or some other nonsense. So we must embrace reality. We need to deal with those who are actually successful. Are we going to focus on the individuals who will call themselves integrationists or pseudo-nationalists who for the past 100+ years have been ineffective and unsuccessful in their programs? Or are we going to focus on the people, the only groups of people who are actually successful? Desire was to be independent and sovereign and secure in that sovereignty. Ever since we were brought here, we want to free ourselves from the plantation, free ourselves from the rule of the whites and offspring. Those who practice ancestral religion did that during slavery. It didn't take them hundreds of years. They did it in their lifetime. They were successful, establishing independent nations. After enslavement, because we forced the end of enslavement because of ancestral religion, then we established independent towns in our lifetime so that our children can grow up in independent black towns. So so-called integrationists and the pseudo-nationalists never did that in reality, or else you would be able to point to, hey, this is the town of Pan-Africa. There are 10,000 people in the town. We have everything we need in the town, and we're running everything in the town. Why can't we point to that? Because in reality, these various philosophies are rooted in white culture. When you get to the basis of it, the only people who have been successful are our direct blood ancestors and ancestors who maintain their practice of ancestral religion and utilize that to motivate themselves to move forward in a harmonious fashion and take their independence, establish their sovereignty in whatever way they were able to, whether it was repatriation or establishing independent settlements and moving forward in that fashion. So that is the model that we follow. That is the precedent that we will stand on. We're not going to stand on failed models, waiting around for 100 years, and hopefully the model will finally kick in. It's not going to kick in because it was doomed from the jump. So now that we gave a little bit more information there, now we're going to read something very quickly, just some basic information about how to incorporate a town. Now, and you can find this information any government websites. They have their own rules and regulations with regard to incorporating cities, incorporating towns, and so forth. Rules are slightly different from state to state. There are certain things that are fundamental, but there are certain things that are that vary from state to state. So you can find this information in various places all over the internet, and this is just one quick piece dealing with that. Okay, and before we take a call, well, we're gonna go through this real quick, and then we're gonna take some calls. Just want to get through this piece. All right, and it's just a quick article, as a matter of fact. How do you found a town? First, get to know the neighbors. So each state has its own rules on municipal incorporation. In general, you need to get 51% of the eligible voters in the area to go along with you. They say here it's easiest to start a town from scratch as opposed to by succession or secession. Most upstarts begin as unincorporated communities within a larger county. Now, of course, with regard to some of us, we won't have to get 51% of the eligible voters to buy in, because if we're starting a town, we're already purchasing the land, and everybody who moved onto the land, we were already on the same page immediately from the beginning. All right. So to incorporate a town, you'll need a lawyer who can handle the paperwork. Once you've decided on where to put your town, the first step toward the town is to get a petition signed by some of the people who live there. Of course, in our case, everybody will sign the petition. In Texas, for example, you'll need 10% of the voters. In Arkansas, for example, you need to get 75 signatures no matter how big your town is going to be. So that's an indication of the differences with regard to incorporation based on states. An application for forming a town includes the signed petition, a proposed name, and in some cases, a proposed form of government. In some applications, in some states, you don't have to propose the form of government you're going to take up front. But then some states require that you propose the form of government in your application. There are 4 basic town governments to choose from. The mayor-council form, which is the mayor and then the city council, the council manager, commission, or the representative town meeting. But some states' laws limit your options depending on the size of your community. Some states will allow you to form a town and it's only 50 or 60 people. There are some states, like, for example, Washington State, you have to have, like 500 or something like that. Once you complete your application, all you typically need is a yes vote from your neighbors and the approval of the county judge or state official. In some places, however, a town charter must be granted by vote of the state legislature. So that's a key point, because in some areas you can choose a state where it's not dependent on the legislature to confirm your application. It will make more sense for us if you're establishing an independent Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit town to go to a state wherein you're not dependent on the state legislature to approve that town charter. Because if they see it's an independent, nationalist type town, they'll be like, no, we're not approving that. But if you're in a certain state where you don't have to go through the legislature, then that makes more sense. Now, depending on where you live, you may face certain restrictions on your right to incorporate. Your proposed town may need to have a minimum number of people, for example, or it may need to be a minimum distance from other towns and cities. The description of where it is should be very specific. And some states will expect your town to have a unique name, so of course that won't be a problem for when we establish incorporate towns, because we will have traditional names. Of course, we're not going to have some English name or Arabic names or anything else like that, any nonsense like that. An unincorporated community gets its services from the county without paying municipal taxes. Why might you want to incorporate? First, you could be heading off annexation by a nearby city. So, for example, what they're talking about is you can be an unincorporated community, and you've been living in that community unincorporated, but you're functioning as a community and so forth for a number of years. But then the large city right next to you decides they would like to expand, and they will annex you and take over your territory, and now you become part of that city now. You used to be an unincorporated community, an uncharted community, but now you're annexed. Basically, you're taken over. And once you are annexed, now you're part of the big city, then all of those large property taxes and everything else that comes along with that city, now you have to pay. You begin to suffer. However, if you incorporate your town, then you cannot be annexed by another city. Just like, a city like Chicago couldn't take over another city that's incorporated because that's encroaching upon their territory as a sovereign entity. So that's one of the values of incorporation. Second, unincorporated communities have very little control over what gets built in the area. But towns can control their own zoning and thereby protect their property value. So when you're talking about zoning land, you can zone land for commercial enterprises, you can zone land for housing, you can zone land for industrial, manufacturing and things like that. When you incorporate your own town, you control the zoning, and therefore and you can decide where the ancestral area is going to be, where the business area is going to be, whether or not people can open up businesses in certain areas. If you want to have a specifically residential section of the town where you don't want a great deal of traffic, you want it to be more serene and secluded, and then you have a certain section of the town where it's zoned for businesses, another section of the town that's zoned for industrial manufacturing and things like that. You can control that zoning. You can make those determinations if you're incorporated, and you also control the property value. So if you're unincorporated, once again, get annexed by another city, then your property value skyrockets. Instead of paying $1,000 a year for your property taxes, all of a sudden you have to pay $8,000 a year, and that's how people lose their homes and lose control of their businesses and everything else. So when you control the zoning, then you have control over what you're doing. All right, so those are basic, the values with regard to and benefits of incorporation of a town. So that's just some basic information. Again, when you look at the requirements, municipal regulations with regard to incorporating a town in a specific state, you have to go by, of course, what those regulations are in the state. So those are the things to look for. We're going to take a couple of phone calls. Okay, Michio on the phone line, number 5808. You got a question or a comment? Okay, number 5808 on the phone line. Question or a comment? Okay, let me make sure we didn't miss. All right. Okay, Michiawo on the phone line, number 8581. You got a question or a comment? Okay, number 8581. Can you hear me on the phone line? Okay, so hopefully Blog Talk is not having a problem. Every now and then they have a little problem. So let's see. So we have some comments in the chat room. If you heard me on the phone line and you couldn't answer if something was going on, you can maybe hang up and call right back and we'll see if that takes care of it. And of course, anybody else on the phone line, if you have a question or a comment, you can hit the number 1 so that we can see your hand is raised and we can connect with you on the phone line. Okay, so we saw some comments in the chat room. Want to make sure we didn't miss anything here. Okay, so one question, when we are planning our towns, how do we plan for different ancestral ritual practices? In other words, hold on one second, let me go back up. Other words, a Yoruba person and an Akan person. And hold on one second because there's a little problem with the information in the chat room. And how do we plan for communal gatherings? Is this even anything to be concerned about right now or at all? Okay, so if you're talking about dealing with Nanatom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion in its varied expressions, so we can go back to our precedent that's been set by our ancestresses and ancestors. So when we get forced, typically, of course, Akan people live amongst Akan people and Yoruba people live in Nigeria and so forth. We get forced into these plantations during the Musuo-Keti, the great perversity enslavement era. And then when we come together, we would have communal, ancestral, and what would take place is, and we do that even today. People in North America, we come together, you see some Akan people come together with Yoruba and so forth. And basically what we do is we take turns. So people will invoke the Abosom and Nananum in Samako in the Akan language and ritual manner. And after we do so, then the Yoruba people will come forward and invoke the Orisha and evoke the Egungun in their own language and ritual manner. And then the people who are Fon and Eve will do the same thing with the Vodou and Kubito and so forth in their own ritual fashion. We do that in Hoodoo. We've done that in Vodou. In fact, you'll see in Vodou, as a matter of fact, for example, whether it's Haitian Vodou or Vodou in Louisiana and so forth, when they talk about the different nations, like the Rada Nation and the Petro Nation and so forth, when they talk about different nations, they're literally talking about different nations. The Fawn and Ebe spirits, ancestral spirits come forth, they evoke them. Then the Congo spirits come forth. Then they have some, Igbo spirits and so forth. So different groups are all participating in a Vodou ritual. Same thing would happen in Kudu in North America. Same thing would happen, for example, in Winsi, which is the Akan tradition in Suriname. Not only will they call forth the Akan ancestral spirits and approach the Abosom in their Akan fashion, but then they will have the people from Dahomey, as well as the people from the Congo and so forth, who are all part of those maroon villages, and everybody would do their thing, and it's a harmonious people. There really is no conflict there. So let me know if that answers the question, if that's what you were getting at. All right. Okay, so next question. How could you establish something like this and deny Achiwadiyefo from buying property and moving in the area without being accused of reverse racism? The very simple way is purchasing the land up front, as opposed to, moving into an area, only purchasing some of the land for a residential and then having other land for sale for people who would like to purchase real estate or people who would like to open businesses and so forth. If you're going to have like 40 acres or 60 acres or something like that, and that is going to be your small community, then you purchase the entire 40 or 60 acres. Now you're in control of that. When we establish businesses, when we deal with zoning and we're controlling the zoning, we're going to allow certain businesses to open, we're in complete control. And of course, we're in control of the legislature, the city government and everything else. So we're in 100% control. We would only invite, for example, when we purchase land, it's a residential areas and the places that are zoned for residential or residences, well, we own all the land that's zoned for the residential or residences. And because we own all the land, we're the ones who are building the houses, the apartment complexes, the condos, and so forth. And when we build those, if we decide to sell, we're only going to sell to our people. We're not going to just open it up and say anybody who would like to come by. Absolutely not. We are only selling to the people within our community who are part of ODWIRAMAN and understand consciously all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, all African people, black people in the Western Hemisphere are part of ODWIRAMAN, the Purified Nation. But only those who are conscious of that, who are fully aware, who have begun that process of purification, engaged in non-Asom ancestral religion, are on the right track. Those are the people who will be, that we will sell to if we decide to sell, distribute this, property. But never anybody outside. So we can have absolute control over that. All right, we just want to make sure we didn't miss anything else in the chat room. All right, and the next piece. Also, how would we establish a government, mayors, police, etc., that would be respected? Hold on one second. Okay, so you may have asked that question before we read the piece dealing with the establishment or incorporation of the town, but, for example, certain states, they require that you put forth the form of government that you are going to have as part of your town. You must have that as part of the application. So if it's the mayor, city council version, then that's going to be the form of government. You're the only people in the town. All of your people are the only people who are part of the town. So the only people, of course, that you're going to draw from with regard to putting people in office are your own people. You're in complete control of the town. You incorporated the town. All the inhabitants are your people. All of the people who are in office are your people. So that's all there is to it. There's nothing anybody can say outside of that. We have our own mayor. We have our own city council. We have our own police and so forth. Because that's part of the law. I mean, that's part of the statute with regard to any state when they're establishing a town. They receive grants and loans and certain things, just like other states with regard to public work. For example, building sidewalks and sewer systems and things like that. You can establish that as well. And you can receive funds from the state if you want to go that route. You don't have to receive funds from the state to build your sewer system and that kind of infrastructure. But if you did want to go that route, you have the right to do that because you have incorporated a town and you have that right. So with regard to respecting the form of government that's already embedded and encoded within the municipal regulations of any state with regard to incorporation. All right. How large an area of land will it need to be, and what amenities does it need to have? In other words, sewage systems dug and power lines and so forth. That is totally dependent on who's establishing the town. Like we said, you have some towns in America, there are 65 people in the town. That's it. They don't have sewage systems. They didn't go that route. They just decided to build their homes. They have, solar power and things like that. Some of them are much older, and they don't have solar power and things like that, but they've been around for a very long time. Some of them may have petitioned the, county government with regard to sewer systems and water lines and things like that. But then other ones, they don't deal with that. They just want to be as autonomous as possible. They don't want to have to deal with the county government with regard to infrastructure, so they just do their own thing. So it's totally dependent on the community and what they require, what they want to have, what kind of amenities they want to have. Okay. Okay, and yes, the next question, what happened with the Black Million Man March mission towards nation building? Farrakhan started it with his other wives. He just didn't let the rest of the NOI know about it. Yes, he does have other wives. The people in the nation know about that when he announced to the laborers in 2003 that he had, quote unquote, taken on other wives and has children. People outside that community don't know about that, but that's taking place. They're still waiting for, the mother plane to come with the 1,500 baby planes to, drop bombs on the white man and all of that. That's what they're still waiting for. So until that happens, then nation building won't jump off. So that's pretty much what's happening with them. So, so we're going to take a couple of calls. Yes, so there was another question. Would this be similar to the Afro-centered community in Austin, Texas that Ian Naila we had on the show talking about the Ebibi Mine Village? In a similar sense, yes, they're doing something similar. Initially, they're talking about establishing, in a Ebibi Mine village, a cultural village and so forth, a self-sustaining village. Once they established that, and she was talking about when you go back to the archives of the Egua Marketplace Day, they were also talking about, miniature homes and how you can establish those miniature homes. $20,000 you can build these mini homes and everything else. So she talked about a number of different things. Eventually, they probably would go towards the route of incorporation as well, depending on where they are in that region. So just want to make sure we didn't miss anything else before we get on the phone line right quick. Okay, so I think we got that. Okay. Okay, so on the phone line, Michelle number 3358. You got a question or a comment?
Yes. How you doing, brother? My name is Tareen. I'm Tareen Thomas. I had called in the last time.
Oh, what's up, brother? How you doing?
How you doing, bro? This don't have anything to do with the actual subject that we're talking about right now, although it is essential to the soul. But I just wanted to know, basically, literally, how do I evoke the bosom to find out my particular divine function or my blood circle within, myself? Like, how do I actually like get on my knees and pray, or is it a certain way that I must, do that to find out, or what steps do I need to take to do that?
Okay, that's a good question. So the most direct way, I think about it like this: in a traditional setting, before everything jumped off with regard to enslavement and everything else, it would be our parents, our grandparents, as we're growing up, they would tell us what clan we come from, what master clan, what patri clan, what our culture is, and, the different from the different divinities that govern us. Now, we come over here, most of our people in our family are not involved in ancestral religion, so they don't really know about that. However, we do have family members who do know about that, and these are our direct blood ancestors and ancestors. So we lean more so towards them to give us that information. So the key is, and we always say the Sama Nkomre, or the ancestral shrine, is the ritual centerpiece of Nanasom. It's the ritual centerpiece of Afuraitkaitnit, or African ancestral religion, no matter what expression it is, whether it's Yoruba or Akan or Igbo or whatever it is. Ancestral communication is key. So we have on one hand, we have the article Incorporation Ancestral Shrine Communication, but then we also did a broadcast where we went through that article in detail. The article itself talks about the nature of the ancestral shrine, what the function is, how to establish one, a basic setup for one. But then we did a broadcast called Incorporation Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation, where we went into detail about ancestral communication, went through that article piece by piece, so that you can have an understanding of how to establish a basic ancestral shrine. And basically what it is no different than if your grandparents came over your house, you have them come sit down, you offer them something to drink, you offer them some food if they were hungry, and after you do all of that, then you would sit down and listen to them. And it's no different when they make their transition. They are our ancestors, they are literally our great-great-grandparents. So you set up a place for them, which is ancestral shrine, no different than if you set out a chair for your grandparents when they came over to the house. You give them some food, you give them some water, you pull libation, you set out an offering or whatever. You say the ritual prayer to call them, invoke them, call them to come into the room, and once they come into the room, then you sit down and you listen. You sit down through home meditation, and you tune and you listen, and you also ask those questions that you have. And then they begin to give you that information spiritually as well. So we go into that whole piece in the broadcast, and you can get it off of YouTube as well as this channel here, the Blog Talk Radio channel.
You talking about the ancestral summons, right?
No, not that one. That's the Ubin Shane. That's the book. But that's the specific one. In fact, if you go to our YouTube page, the specific broadcast says Comrade and Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation. That one in particular is the one where we go through the document Ancestral Shrine Communication. And you'll see in the description box for that video, you will see the link to the Comrade Ancestral Shrine Communication article. But we mentioned it in the broadcast, but you'll see the link there. And you can, it's a 6-page article. You can download that as you're listening, and then we go through it.
Okay. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. Love.
Okay, Medase, no problem. Okay. And I'm going to go to the phone line. Michiawo on the phone line number 9123. You got a question or a comment?
What's up, Brother Quasi? This is Brother Al. I'm calling from Durham, North Carolina. I heard on the show, I think it was last week, that you would be here on the 25th at the Psychic Soul Fair, possibly. So if that's so, then I'm looking forward to it. I'll be in attendance. I had just one question in regards to how you go about receiving, your name. Is there like any oracular readings that are involved in, you choosing the name. I know there's some systems out there where, you choose a name for yourself, but then you go through maybe like an oracular process to verify whether or not that name is suitable, I guess, for your, in alignment with your divine purpose. And I just wanted to get your insight as to some of the ins and outs of how that works, or maybe even how that worked, for you personally, how you came about with the name that you now carry. So I just wanted you to elaborate on that.
Okay. Good question. So, and with regard to that as well, we did a entire broadcast just specifically on that, and that broadcast is Rinin and Rinini, the nature of the name, and you'll see that on the YouTube channel as well. And what we did was we talked about a couple of our publications. One of them, we've been sharing the Ancestral Summons dealing with the name. Now, when we talk about oracular divination, there are various forms of oracular divination. That, in fact, the term Bisa or Adebisa, the root is Bisa in the Akan tradition, which is talking about inquiry. It means to ask or to consult. So to call Bisa is to go ask or go consult. That means somebody's going to get divination. They're going to receive divination. So anytime you're engaged in inquiry with regard to the Nananum Nsamapo, or the spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestors, or the Abosom, you're engaged in consultation. So even if you sit down in front of your ancestral shrine and ask a question mentally, or just project those images of the things that you are desiring to learn about, that projection is a provocation of energy. You're provoking them for a response. You're engaged in an oracular function at that moment. So yes, in that sense, it is oracular. So again, like we were saying with the other callers, typically you get your name from your parents because they know who you are, they know what clan you come from and everything else. So since we are in a situation where our relatives are not involved in the culture, we go to the relatives who still remained involved in the culture, who have been assigned to us throughout the course of our lives by the Supreme Being pre-incarnation, which are our direct blood, spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestors. So again, going to the ancestral shrine is key, because even if somebody gave you a name, say you went to somebody and they did a reading and they said, hey, your name should be this, and this is the spirit that governs you, and this is a suitable name for you and everything else, you're still going to have to go to your Nsamampo to confirm that. Because if they're doing real divination, what they're really doing is consulting your own craft, your soul, your divine consciousness, the divinity that dwells in your head region. Real divination ultimately rests upon the diviner being able to divine your craft to get the information and give it to you externally, what your craft's been trying to tell you internally that you weren't able to hear. So if your craft's been guiding you towards the kind of name you can have, you should have your actual name, and you couldn't hear it or you couldn't feel it or tune to it, you go to a diviner, and they get that information from your craft and the Abosom and Nsamampo who are connected to you, who are only relaying what your craft, projecting, and then they can show you externally what your craft is saying internally. So even if somebody was a competent diviner, and they were able to attune to your craft, attune to the Abosom connected to you, you're still going to have to clear it when you go and sit with your own craft. You're still going to have to clear it before you make that decision, when you sit with your own Nsamampo. So our recommendation is that people go directly to their own Nsamampo. When we talk about a real name, you're born with the name Mini, just like you have different instruments, say different brass instruments. You blow into a trumpet, you get a certain sound. You put that down, you blow into a trombone, you get a different sound. You put that down, blow into a tuba, you get a different sound. It's the same air, but because the structure of the brass is slightly different, the air moving through and vibrating through that structure causes the sound vibrations emanating from that structure to be slightly different. Nobody looks exactly like you. Nobody has your specific physiological structure. It's unique to you. Even if you have an identical twin, it's slightly different. Nobody has your spirit body structure. So your spirit body is unique to you. When life force energy, the energy of Ra and Ra'et, Yonkampon and Yonkaton is constantly circulating through your specific unique form, that means there's a unique configuration of sound vibrations that are constantly emanating from you, just like because the different brass instruments have their own form, the sounds emanating from them are unique to them. Because nobody has your exact structure, a unique configuration of sound vibrations that are constantly emanating from you just by virtue of the fact that you are alive and you are breathing in the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'et. Your Ba is circulating through you and resounding that configuration of energy. Your body is constantly emanating that configuration, unique configuration of sound vibrations, therefore constantly emanating your actual name. If you can attune to those vibrations with a spiritual ear, you can attune to the name that's actually emanating from you consistently on a regular basis. So that, in reality, that's the technology behind people actually attuning to what their name is. They may not, look at all those details, but in reality, when you attune to it's just like if you hear something, you may not be thinking about, well, the sound vibrations are entering into my eardrums and causing it to vibrate, and then I hear this and that. You're not thinking about the mechanics of it, but that's what's actually taking place. So we were just talking about the mechanics of what's actually happening when somebody engages in oracular divination. They can attune to the Abosom. They repeat to you that configuration of sound vibrations that makes up your true name. You can attune to that by connecting with your direct blood, Nsamantos, ancestresses and ancestors, and your own crop. And the more consistent you are with them, then they will direct you to information, direct you to individuals, put people in front of you that will confirm for you physically what they shared with you spiritually. If they share with you that you are from the Bassa ethnic group from Liberia, and you didn't know anything about the Bassa people, and you never even heard about that, next thing you know, you're walking down the street and you bump into somebody, and they turn out to be Bassa, then they run down all the Bassa culture, and they don't even know why they're running it down to you. And we've had that happen. I've had that happen, myself. So right after, the next day after going to a shrine, or a couple of days after. So the key is they will prove to you physically what they tell you spiritually, so you can take it from, the spiritual to the physical, so you can be confirmed and convicted in what you have learned. And they will give you multiple confirmations before you move forward. So for us, and we go into detail about that in that particular broadcast. So when you go to the YouTube page, you'll see it, Renin and Renenit, RENEN, RENENIT, and the nature of the Ren, or the nature of the Ren, the name. That broadcast is specifically focused on that. And we also deal with one of the articles we have, not only Ancestral Shrine Communication, but then we have another article, Sankofa Wodin, Return, Go, and Grasp Your Ancestral Name, and we go into detail about that process. In the broadcast, we go through that article and clarify the various points in that article. So when people go to their shrines and everything, they can move forward in a, clear fashion.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That answers it. Clear as day. It don't get no better. Yo, brother, I greatly appreciate it. And I'll be moving forward with the information that you just gave. And, again, hope to see you all on the 25th at the Psychic Soul Fest. You all are actually, in attendance. I just heard about it yesterday, and then I heard the show. Heard you mention on the show last week, a show from last week. So I've been telling some brothers of mine about it, and, either way, just looking forward to more of this powerful work. And, Wow.
Okay, Medase, I appreciate it. And yes, we're going to get that information. We're going to get the details out, and we'll be sending that information out soon. All right, we just want to, just a programming note, there are 10 minutes left less than 10 minutes left in the broadcast. For individuals, if you would like to listen beyond 11 o'clock, you must call in within the next 9 minutes. Or else, just if you're listening online, it will cut off online. But everybody who is on the phone will be able to continue to listen. We probably won't have to go beyond 11 o'clock, but just in case, you can call in now, 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. You have about 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes to call in. All right. We want to make sure we didn't miss anything else in the chat room. Also, for the individuals who are not able to stay on, just this past FIDA, this past Friday, we launched an initiative, the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood or African Manhood Training Initiative. Now, we published our book, OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood, African Manhood, and we've talked about that. We've done broadcasts. We've done a couple of Ustream broadcasts, parts 1 and 2, and then we did a broadcast on Blog Talk Radio a few months back where we went through the entire book. We published that book in 2008, so-called 2008. We've been teaching and having those workshops even prior to publishing the book. That's what led to the publishing of the book. We were teaching those 7 principal values of OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood in Chicago for a number of years, and then, of course, when we moved to D.C. But leading up to that, the publication, we were teaching it already. Then in 2008, we published the book. And we would have the workshop. Young men would come out as well as older men as well. Everybody receives a free copy of the softcover book. At the workshop, we go through all of the information. That is a manual for manhood. It's 7 principal values of manhood governed by the 7 days of the week and the energy that animates the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7 days of the week, and also the chronobiological cycle called the circumception cycle that governs our physiology. So every single day of the week, there's an opportunity for the Afurakani man to refine his character, refine his focus, refine his drive, and align himself with divine order based on the energy of the day. So this is what the book is dealing with. So we, of course, feel that every Afurakani man needs to have that book in their possession. This is one of the reasons, of course, why the ebook version of OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood we made available for free. Just like all of our 16 books are available for free, it's free ebook downloads. So people have been able to access the Afurakani Manhood book for free for a number of years. We've had thousands and thousands of downloads of that book over the years, and people have always, responded with positive feedback with either themselves or their sons or nephews or significant others. With one read of the book, they began to transform their lives, transform their behavior in a positive direction. If they were engaged in self-destructive behavior, whether it was with regard to their relationships with children, family, other adults, significant others, drug use, or whatever else, they began to transform their lives. So those workshops are always free. We want to expand those workshops to different cities, of course. They're always going to be free, and we're always going to give away free copies of the softcover book in addition to the ebook. And then we also have the no party flow distributor option, meaning we have the means by which the young men, as well as the young women, but in this case the young men and older men and so forth, if they need to work to begin to generate income, they can begin that process immediately. They can start that tonight. Simply by going to our page, they can become a distributor of our softcover books. We have 16 books that we have published, including OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood. We would like to expand that, and the expansion comes in where some people can purchase the first, the minimum purchase is 10 books. They purchase the books wholesale and they sell them retail. And that's how they generate their funds. And we have some people doing that now. Minimum order is 10 books. Some people do not have the funds to purchase the first 10 books. They don't have like the $75 or something to purchase 10 books. We typically print on demand. We print our own books in-house on our own printers in color. Although we would like to be able to just give all the books out on consignment, and then they just sell them, and then they compensate us, and then they purchase more books and so forth. We just don't have the funds at this point to be able to, print out a few thousand books and give them out and then wait for the funds to come in. So part of our GoFundMe initiative, OBARIMA, is to not only get the softcover books out to as many Afurakani young men as possible, but also the no party distributor option, so that they can begin to work immediately. we're talking about culture and nation building. If they come to us, they should be able to say, do you have an option for us where we can begin to work based on our culture? And we have that option. It's already up and running, and some people are already engaged in that process. And this, by the way, of course, is for males and females. So if anybody in the community, you, male or female, would like to sell our softcover books, simply go to the publications page and you will see the little video where we talk about that. And then, of course, you can purchase the book wholesale. We have a distributor information document laying out the wholesale and retail prices. All the information is laid out. But our GoFundMe initiative is to expand these workshops to different parts of, the country, of course, give out softcover books for free to as many people as possible. We need to fund that, but then at the same time to expand that distributor program so that we are employing our people. They become entrepreneurs, independent immediately. And we can reach them right where they are right now. So we've been doing that work for over 7 years, and we just want to expand the work so we can reach even more people. So we'll put the link to the OBARIMA page. So we have a GoFundMe campaign for that. Any donation of $15 or more will allow you to receive one or more of our softcover books. Just let us know which ones you would like to receive, and we'll send those out. So therefore, it's not just a free donation, just giving away money. You're receiving one or more books in the process, so it's more like a purchase. But at the same time, you're also supporting the expansion of this effort. We can reach every one of our Afurakani young men and adults wherever they are right now. Anybody who has a cell phone, a smartphone, no matter what socioeconomic condition they find themselves in, they can download the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood book right now and transform their lives. They can also download the 2-part series on the book that we did on Ustream TV, and also the 2.5-hour broadcast where we went through the entire book, similar to the way we conduct a workshop. They can download that as well so they can get clarity on every aspect of the book, just in case we're not able to go to a workshop where they are in their city at this particular time, or if they don't have the funds to purchase a softcover book, they can download it for free, and they can download the information so they can be transformed right where they are right now, wherever they are in the country and different parts of the world. So if you would like to support that effort, yet I say we appreciate that, and we thank you to the individuals who made their contributions so far. And again, it's about a minute left in the broadcast, so if you want to listen beyond 11 o'clock, 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. You have about a minute to call in. Okay, we're going to go back to the phone line. We have one more call on the phone line. Okay, Michiawo on the phone line, number 6277. You got a question or a comment?
Hetep, Kaleo, this is Naila. How are you?
Good. Hetep, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I just wanted to, I'm glad I spoke to Sister Jennifer tonight. She reminded me that you were broadcasting and gave me the number because the internet is down here, so I was able to call in. And I wanted to just, if I could, just make some additional comments about one of the callers called in about how to invoke or, your ancestors and ancestresses. And one of the things he asked, he says, well, should I get down on my knees and pray? And as wonderful and as that might be, that's not usually a part of African ancestral traditions, is getting down on your knees and praying. So there is prostration at certain points, but that's not necessary. You can sit in a chair. You can be in the shower. You can sit at, in the park by the water, at the base of a tree, on your couch, and you can invoke your and venerate your ancestors and ancestresses without literally getting down on your knees and praying. That's very Western Christian even Asian process or thought about prayer. It's not that in our ancestral traditions that we don't, again, get in a prostrate position, like on your knees or laying full out, or some other physical form of it. If your spirit moves you to get down on your knees or lay out, or lay out on your, stomach and face down, or even back on the floor and you're facing up, then that's what. Then go ahead and follow that if it's a driving thing. But our ancestors and ancestresses can hear us, and they know our intentions and our desires, because they're not only right here with us, they're also within us. And that can be said oftentimes for the deities, the Orisha or Abosun, or whatever term that goes along with that particular culture. So I wanted to comment on that. And then the other young brother who called in and asked about how do you find your ancestral name and in relationship, and he said to destiny. So our destinies are multifaceted sometimes, so it's not just one thing that we came here to do or focus on or be. And that's where oracular divination or guidance comes in, where you learn what your Kosei Taye is, which is Yoruba for your life path and purpose, which we often don't get living in this part of the world, in this incarnation, until we're much older, when we come across our ancestral traditions. But it's never too late. And at the same time, keep in mind that your ancestral names may not just be one thing or from one particular culture. Myself, for instance, I have names from my dominant ancestral tradition. And they've been added on to at different phases of my life and my past, both spiritually and culturally. And so don't think that if you get an ancestral name that it may be the only name, or, that's where you stop. And that's not for everyone either. So you might have 2 names or 3 names initially, and then ultimately a few years down the line you may end up picking up 2 or 3 more names, whether it's from that same ancestral tradition or from different ones. Because spirits will speak and convey the messages to you as you're able to receive them. So you may be more spiritually cultivated and aware now than you were 5-10 years ago, and 5-10 years from now you may and hopefully should be more spiritually and culturally aware and cultivated than you are today. And with that spiritual cultivation and awareness can often come a realignment or of who you are spiritually and culturally with who your people were and what they tasked you with. Because it's not just about getting a name, an ancestral name. That's really important, but it's also about opening up and becoming spiritually and culturally evolved to know what it is that you are doing in this lifetime. What are you manifesting, not just for you, but for your entire spiritual, cultural, ancestral, collective. So, and that is manifest from the spirit realm. So you come here and you know that, okay, so I have this the spirit and energy or desire to be a cultural activist, and I'm going to do it in the realm of law. At the same time, it doesn't just stop there. So there are nuances to our destinies and our life paths and purposes, divine purpose. So, and then the last thing I wanted to say was, you were talking about the books and saying that how they were really, really influential in young men and adult men coming into their own, or just becoming stronger and spiritually and culturally cultivated and so on. And you used the term significant other. So I wanted to make sure that we were really clear with what you meant by significant other, in case someone comes across this broadcast after it's uploaded on the YouTube channel or here on Blog Talk, that you mean significant other in a heterosexual perspective way.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, because for a second when I was listening, I was like, wait a minute, that sounded like he might have been saying to folks, significant other for brothers with other brothers, and it's like, no, that is not what my brother meant. So let's be clear on that.
Yeah, in fact, that's we'll say, of course, it's number one, dissexuality, homosexuality is absolutely insane and perverted. But sometimes we'll say that because some of the people are not married yet, so then we'll say, this is another. But but yes, no, definitely clarify. Yeah. Always heterosexual, number one, and number two is only Afurakani men, Afuraitkaitnit women, no interracial coupling, none of that nonsense.
Right. So yeah, I was like, let me make sure I mention that. And then that also goes back to dovetails right back to what you were saying about the questions about the the African communities, whether it's a village or it's a city or a town or whatever. And
yeah,
how
I wanted to ask you about that because somebody brought you up in the chat room. Well, they said,
okay. I didn't maybe hear that part, but I did hear the last question.
Yeah, they asked, and I appreciate what the information you were sharing about the ancestral names as well. Somebody asked in the chat room a few minutes back, they said, is this similar to what the sister who was talking about the village in Austin, Texas was talking about? Mm-hmm. And I said, so you were talking about a self-sustaining village in Austin. Right. And I said, possibly you all may think about incorporating later. So, but can you just address that? Were you focused at first on just the self-sustaining village, and then at some point later thinking about incorporation, or how was that going to work out?
Okay. Well, it's going to depend on, and hopefully, and not hopefully, prayerfully, and blessedly, that this piece that's going to come in the next few days is how we acquire the land. And the land, the vision was two different things. One is, I'm sitting right in the fan, let me turn it around, is we would either get a large plot of land within the city limits of Austin in a particular area, and we would, for lack of a better term, petition to City Council that we are establishing a closed community. Okay. And there are several closed and private communities in a lot of cities, especially in Austin. We have them all over Austin, and they are private communities where, wealthy, affluent, white folks usually predominantly live. And it's not that other ethnic folks can't get in them, but it takes them a bit to get in them, both financially and just meeting certain criteria. So why can't we do the same thing? So we would let them know that we are establishing a private African-centered community, and what will allow us to do that in a way where it won't be not necessarily denied but not disapproved So we're not seeking approval. It's basically I'm going in and telling them this is what we're doing, and you just need to get on board with it. But basically, and this is a courtesy to let you know what we're doing. But we don't want any city backing or funding from the city, the state, or the county, because once you do that, that's when they can say it's reverse discrimination or housing discrimination or whatever kind of discrimination they want to throw at you because you've gotten public funds. Okay. So to answer the other person's question about that. So we will either get a large plot of land and establish our private community within that, in the city limits. And then the other alternative would have been to get some land just outside of the city or within the county and then establish a township or a city or an annex that way. We don't see ourselves doing that, not that it's impossible, only because folks literally want to live in the city. Like myself, my work demands that I be accessible in the city. And so we will look at getting a plot of land, whether it's an acre or 2 acres, 3 acres, because if you really look at even just a half an acre is actually a lot of land to do several things on. Now, 3 acres gives you more room to do more. So our goal will be to, depending on the resources that we have and where the land is and its configuration, if we can get at least 1 acre and then add on to that soon after to 2, 3, or 5 acres, then that's great. If we can get a couple at once, then that's what we will do. And then we will place our tiny homes on them, as well as in a certain specific configuration that allows for folks who are not ingrained in African consciousness and way of life to be there as well, and mostly to provide for income, like renting the spaces out and so on the outer perimeter. And then, of course, there's the inner perimeter where there are more conscious, people, and then there's the inner sanctum where we do the ritual work, and that's private, and that's for folks who have worked their way up or who are in those ranks. And then the other brother asked about how do you govern, or I guess it's a brother, but whoever the comment was saying, well, how do you get people to comply with your laws and rules and so on? Well, for us, we plan to have an ogboni, which is a Yoruba term for an elder society, okay, who is basically like a board of directors, except from a cultural, spiritual perspective. And they get to decide, and as a collective, how to deal with certain issues and what the bylaws or the quote-unquote rules or guidelines will be, and how we will enforce them and deal with conflict resolution and so on. I was actually thinking about this the other day that, when we have our village, what would happen is, someone did this or someone did that. And basically, if you lay out the rules and the guidelines and our laws immediately up front, and also have a vetting process where, just like, back in the day when our maroon people would, run away from the plantation or off the ships when they, bought us here and establish our maroon societies. It's like you don't bring folks into the inner sanctum immediately. You keep them on the outskirts to see how they're going to adapt and behave and influence the entire community before you allow them deeper into the community. And that's one of the ways that you deal with people cooperating and following your rules. We even the question of, I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of people who are gravitating towards this idea, but there are people who I know who do not fully engage in true consciousness, where they're in relationships with, or people who are not black. So what do you do with those people who want to come and live in the community and they're married to or have a significant other partner who is not black?
Or
my thing
insignificant
is,
other.
why are you here? Yeah, thank you. Right? And then what's the spirit and soul of those children that might be, come out of that relationship? Then why are you coming to the village? You either need to leave that person behind, or just not knock on the door at all, because you're not coming. And I don't care if anybody wants to come back and say, "Oh, we're going to sue you for reverse discrimination. We're going to do this because you're doing that." And it's like, do we see anybody suing Native Americans for reverse discrimination? Because the last time I checked, their reservations, and even if they're not full-on reservations or communities, they have sovereignty in this country. So they get to have their own police and court and justice system. They get to have restrictions on who can and cannot come into their reservation. So did anybody sue them? Because as far as I'm concerned, we are the first and only, as my brother has taught me, Brother Ra Quasi, that we are the first and only indigenous people of this planet. If anybody wants to claim indigenous sovereignty, it's us. And so if you have, like, there are people that I know, like, there was a town for sale in Texas a few years ago, actually a couple of years ago, and I think it actually still is for sale. It's very small. It's like less than a mile, but it's a town. Like you said, there are some cities or towns that have 65 people. Well, this one is a small town, and it was for sale for like $2 million or something. And it's got buildings and stuff, and brick and mortar things and whatnot. Or maybe it was $12 million or something like that. I'm like, well, if I'm going to spend $12 million, I want more than an acre. But at the same time, it's a town that already has its own, it's recognized as its own entity. And so we can do those things. We can find plots of land or acreage in places and apply for, at some point, to be annexed or incorporated. But you've got to have your own infrastructure in place and foundation, so that when you do go to whatever government entity that will sanction you, then you have to already know what is going to be the makeup of your little town or city or whatever you're going to call it, your village. Because if you don't have that in place, whatever comes afterwards is going to eventually erode what you initially started out with, or evolve into something that you never intended it for to be.
Exactly.
So what's the huge undertaking in the process? I'm sorry?
No, you said what now? Say it again.
No, I was saying, I didn't hear what you were saying, so the line got a little choppy. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just saying,
so I can hear you now.
I appreciate that. Appreciate you for clarifying the information, because somebody did bring you up, and also for sharing some more insight on the nature of the ancestral names. Those are all of that is relevant when people are trying to attune to who they are and who they're going to properly identify as. So we appreciate that info. And, of course, let us know how you can come back on, of course, once everything is starting to unfold, so we can talk about the progress of the village. And, of course, for people who don't know, it's Ia Naila. When we had Ia Naila on a couple of months ago talking about the Tiwan Tiwa Bibi Mine village, so you can see that, you can check out that broadcast. It's one of the archives on the Blog Talk Radio Show archive section on our channel. So T1TY ABB Mind Village. It was on the Egua Marketplace show, so you can check that out. But yeah, so Medase.
Right. And we also have a Facebook page as well. Thank you, Medase. Kotopwe. Yeah, we also have the information. That link is also on our Facebook page for Tawan ABB Mind. So if you scroll down and look, and you'll eventually run into that link from that broadcast. And so you're going to North Carolina soon. When is that?
All right. They're having the head Ma'al called the Soul Psychic Fair. Once again, they've had it in a few different cities. The sister Ma'at in Ma'al Keru. And the last time we spoke at it was when they had it in Virginia. And we did it here in D.C. She went to Virginia. She's been to some different cities. The last time I was able to connect with them at that particular event was at the event in Virginia. Actually, no, that was a different. No, that wasn't so like fair. Yeah, so they had one in D.C., then they had another one in Virginia, they had another one in another state. So this one is coming up July 25th. So we're gonna put the details out in the next day or so with regard to that.
Okay. I was just tapped on the shoulder and reminded. Okay, so the brother who called in and asked about invoking the ancestors, he has a really deep voice. Spirits told me to tell him there's somebody named Henry and Albert that is trying to get us in touch with him. I don't know who they are or why, but I didn't say anything until now, and then so that whole thing about the oracular divination or consultation. There are also people called mediums or spiritualists who are very different from people who claim to be priests and do divination, because they're not often spiritualists or can delve into the spirit realm or the ancestral realm in the same way, if at all. And so I don't know who Albert and Henry are, but that's what came up when he was talking to you.
Now, that was for the brother who asked about the shrine, the prayer, or asking about the name?
No, the one who was asking about, I'm trying to remember the order. Wait a minute. The brother who asked about the names was the second brother who called in. It was the first one, because I came in, I didn't, I haven't been here since the beginning. I just came in pretty late. And he was the one who had a really deep voice and who asked. He said that this is not on topic when he first started talking.
Right.
That brother. Yeah, that was him.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know if he's still listening in or will listen to this later, or you have a way of, contacting him.
In fact, I can email him because he sent me an email earlier, so I can send him that email.
Okay. And I didn't get anything else yet, but that was really, really, it was Henry that came and then Albert. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm gonna get off. I'm gonna listen, but and let you close out. And I need to talk to you about something. So if you have time, call me when you get off the air or first thing tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah. No problem. No problem. I can give you a call.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for having us and doing this again, and appreciate all your work and effort and that you do culturally for us.
Okay, Medase, we appreciate you as well. So I'll give you a call real quick. All right.
Okay. Odwira.
Okay. So we want to make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room. I think we got everything. I think that was it. So, yeah. So again, we thank you for tuning in to the broadcast. We will be back on tomorrow for Egua Marketplace Day. So please continue to share the information, share the broadcast event notifications with your contacts. Connect with us on YouTube as Ojidafo, Instagram as Ojidafo, Twitter as Ojidafo, Facebook. We are Kwesi Akan, but you can also type in Ojidafo or Afuraka, Afuraitkait to get to us on Facebook. We also have our Afuraka-Afuraitkait.ning.com website, which is our own private social media network that you can join and create a profile when we post discussions and blogs and videos and everything else. Similar to Facebook, but we have our own separate social network that we pay for that's outside of Facebook and the others, so we have our own autonomy. People from here as well as around the world, our people are studying ancestral religion and interacting and networking and so forth. So, again, Yedase, we tuning in, and Yebeshia Dio, we will meet again. What's up?